There's a number that Adobe does not want you to think too hard about. $22.99 a month, sometimes more, sometimes bundled higher, for access, temporary revocable, subscription-gated access to tools that millions of creative professionals have built their entire careers around. Not for a product you own, not for software that lives on your computer permanently. Cancel that. Subscription and Premiere stops working. Cancel it at the wrong moment in your annual contract, and Adobe can charge you a steep early termination fee, a penalty the United States Federal Trade Commission, in a formal complaint filed in June 2024, described as being deliberately buried in fine print and hidden behind hyperlinks, specifically so most users would never see it before they ironed up. The Department of Justice took that complaint to court, and in March 2026, Adobe agreed to pay a $150 million settlement, $75 million in civil penalties to the federal government, and another $75 million in free services to the customers it had allegedly deceived. That's what Adobe's subscription strategy ultimately cost the company in direct legal penalties alone, not counting the reputational damage, not counting the users who left, not counting the stock that dropped roughly a third over the 12 months leading into late 2025, even as Adobe kept posting record revenue. The money kept coming in, the trust kept bleeding out. And while all of that was happening, a piece of software you can download right now for free without entering a credit card number was growing at a compound annual rate north of 100% and quietly taking over the professional video industry from the inside. That tool is DaVinci Resolve, and the story of how it got here is one of the most unlikely business reversals the creative software industry has ever produced. To understand what DaVinci Resolve actually is, you have to start with what it is not. It is not a YouTube editor with a few color wheels bolted on. It is not a hobbyist alternative for people who can't afford the real thing. DaVinci Resolve is the software that color graded Oppenheimer. It graded Avatar, it graded Star Wars, The Martian, Jason Bourne, Alien, Romulus, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Superman. If you tried to list every major Hollywood blockbuster and prestige television production color graded in DaVinci Resolve over the past decade, the list would be so long it would be faster to name the handful that weren't. Color grading, the process of correcting exposure and lighting inconsistencies and establishing the visual tone that makes a film feel like itself, has been DaVinci's professional domain for over 4 decades. The reputation it built in Hollywood's post-production pipeline was so deep and so well established that no competing product came close to challenging it. That reputation, however, was locked inside a price tag that essentially nobody outside a major film studio could afford. Through the 1980s, 1990s, and into the 2000s, DaVinci's professional color grading systems cost between $200,000 and $800,000. Individual filmmakers and freelancers were simply not the intended customer. Giant studios were. Then, the corporate owner DaVinci sat within. A company called Autodesk's predecessor, Acterna, went bankrupt in 2008. DaVinci itself was profitable, that detail matters, but when a parent organization collapses into bankruptcy proceedings, profitable subsidiaries go up for sale alongside everything else. The auction that followed was, in retrospect, one of the most consequential moments in the history of creative software. An Australian camera and hardware company called Blackmagic Design, run by its founder Grant Petty, placed a winning bid of $10 million for DaVinci's assets. $10 million for software that its previous customers had paid up to $800,000 per installation to access. Petty had built Blackmagic without venture capital, without investor pressure, without borrowed money, a philosophy of self-sufficiency that, as you'll shortly see, turned out to be the single most important factor in every decision that followed. Because what Grant Petty did next with DaVinci was something no venture-backed company, no publicly traded software firm, no startup answerable to a board of investors chasing quarterly growth could have done. He didn't try to maximize the revenue the brand had historically generated. He looked at what DaVinci's technology could actually do, looked at where the creative industry was heading, and then deliberately, systematically made it as accessible as he possibly could, at the cost of every dollar of premium pricing the brand had previously commanded. In 2010, at the National Association of Broadcasters conference, Blackmagic announced new versions of DaVinci Resolve at prices that genuinely shocked the professional post-production world. The macOS version went for $995. That's not a typo. A product that had previously cost between $200,000 and $800,000 was now available for under $1,000. The industry took notice. Then in 2017, Blackmagic did something even more radical. They dropped the studio version of DaVinci Resolve to $299, a single one-time permanent purchase that included not just the industry-leading color grading tools, but a fully capable non-linear video editor built to compete directly with Premiere. And alongside that $299 version, they released something no major professional software company had done before or has done since at this level of capability, a free version with roughly 95% of the same features, available for immediate download, no credit card required, no time limit, no trial expiration. The question that should be forming in your mind right now is the same one Adobe's product team almost certainly asked itself back in 2017 when it saw what Blackmagic had done. Why would anyone do that? What possible business logic justifies giving away 95% of a professional product for free forever? The answer to that question is the reason a rapidly growing number of professionals and students are quietly deleting Adobe from their machines this year, and it's more strategically sophisticated than it first appears. And it starts with a quote from Grant Petty himself, one that cuts closer to the heart of this rivalry than any earnings call or press release ever could. In the next section, we're going to walk through exactly what he said, exactly why the free version isn't charity, and exactly how Adobe's own decisions over the past 2 years handed Blackmagic the most effective marketing campaign it never had to pay for. There's a quote from Grant Petty, the man who owns Blackmagic Design and made every one of these pricing decisions personally, that cuts to the heart of what makes this story different from every other software competition story you've ever heard. He said this: "Cloud licensors are like slumlords. You have to keep buying from them, and the more you're loyal, the more you'll get penalized. It's like your dog does something nice and you beat it with a stick." That is not the language of a corporate earnings call. That is not something a CEO with investors sitting in the room says out loud. It's the kind of thing someone says when they've built their company without borrowing money, when they answer to nobody but their own judgment, and when they genuinely believe the subscription model dominating the software industry isn't just a business strategy, it's an ethical failure. Understanding that Petty's pricing decisions are expressions of a coherent philosophy rather than marketing tactics is the key to understanding why DaVinci Resolve keeps growing while other professional software tools circle the drain of user resentment. The free version isn't a loss leader designed to upsell reluctant customers into a subscription. It's a statement about who creative tools should serve, delivered in the only language that actually reaches people, the language of cost, or in this case, the total absence of it. The business logic behind the free version is genuinely elegant once you see the full picture. Blackmagic Design is not primarily a software company, and that distinction is crucial. Adobe is a software company. Nearly every dollar of Adobe's revenue comes from software subscriptions, with Creative Cloud accounting for the overwhelming majority of its quarterly revenue heading into 2026. When Adobe gives away capability, it's giving away its only product. When Blackmagic gives away DaVinci Resolve, it's giving away the software companion to a hardware business that sells professional cameras ranging from several thousand to tens of thousands of dollars, color grading control panels used in major film studios, broadcast switchers, editing consoles, and a comprehensive range of production tools that fill the physical infrastructure of professional video workflows worldwide. DaVinci Resolve is, from Blackmagic's perspective, not the product. It's the reason you buy the product. The more people learn DaVinci, the more film students who graduate having used it, the more freelancers who build their workflow around it, the more independent studios that standardize on it, the larger the potential customer base for every piece of Blackmagic hardware that DaVinci integrates with most naturally. The free version isn't charity, it's the most efficient customer acquisition strategy in the professional creative industry, executed at a scale Adobe, locked into its subscription revenue dependency, structurally cannot replicate. Then there's the switching cost argument, where DaVinci's free version does something that no amount of advertising could accomplish. One of the primary reasons Adobe retained users through years of price increases, cancellation fee scandals, terms of service controversies, and genuinely frustrating software stability issues wasn't loyalty in any meaningful sense. It was inertia. A professional video editor who has spent 5 years building muscle memory around Premiere's timeline, keyboard, shortcuts, plugin architecture, and export settings faces a real cost when switching to anything else. Relearning tools takes time. Time costs money. For working professionals, the financial risk of spending weeks or months becoming proficient in new software while client deadlines keep arriving is a concrete barrier that rational pricing comparisons can't easily overcome. DaVinci's free version eliminates that barrier entirely. There's no financial risk in downloading it and spending 3 months learning it alongside your existing workflow. You lose nothing by trying it. You discover the color grading tools are objectively superior to anything Premiere offers. You discover the video editor is fully capable of professional work. You discover the audio editing suite, which Blackmagic built by acquiring Fairlight in 2017 and integrating it directly into Resolve, handles post-production audio at a level that would previously have required separate, expensive software. And you discover all of this without spending a single dollar, without entering a payment method, and without being locked into anything. The moment that realization lands, the moment a user understands this isn't a trial, that this is actually the product, that Blackmagic genuinely just gave it to them, the psychological relationship between that user and Adobe changes permanently. The growth numbers that resulted from this strategy are difficult to contextualize without stepping back and looking at the full trajectory. In 2009, the year after Blackmagic acquired DaVinci at auction, the software had approximately 900 users. Not 900,000. 900 individual users, each paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for access to a system only major studios could afford. By January 2019, following the introduction of the free version and the $299 studio tier, DaVinci Resolve had crossed 2 million users. By 2023, that number had reached roughly 5.47 million, representing a compound annual growth rate widely cited in industry. Data north of 100%, a figure so extraordinary it requires a moment to actually process. And the growth hasn't slowed since. Industry data heading into 2026 points to another surge. Some trackers citing roughly a 300% jump in DaVinci's user base following the maturation of its editing tools, alongside the release of version 21 this past May, which added a full photo page competing directly with Lightroom, over 100 new motion graphics effects inside Fusion, and native RAW support for Canon, Fujifilm, Nikon, and Sony cameras, all still free or bundled into that same one-time $219 studio purchase. Over 5 million of those original users arrived between 2018 and 2023 alone, the precise window during which Adobe was raising prices, generating FTC complaints, introducing AI controversies, and systematically eroding the goodwill it had built over decades with the creative community. The timing is not coincidental. Adobe's own behavior during those years functioned, as more than one industry analysis has framed it, as the single most effective marketing campaign DaVinci Resolve never had to pay for. Every price increase. Adobe announced pushed curious users toward the free download page. Every hidden cancellation fee that made news drove freelancers to recalculate whether the switching cost they'd been avoiding was actually smaller than the ongoing cost of staying. And every terms of service update that implied Adobe might train its AI on user project files sent professional studios, organizations working under NDAs with clients who couldn't afford that ambiguity, directly into Blackmagic's arms. That AI controversy deserves its own close look because it crystallized something about the Adobe relationship that no amount of clarification has been able to walk back. And it's exactly where we're headed next. The AI dimension of Adobe's current predicament deserves specific attention because it crystallized something about the Adobe relationship with its users that no amount of clarification has been able to walk back. In early 2024, Adobe updated its terms of service with language, stating the company may access user content through automated and manual methods, including machine learning techniques. The creative community interpreted this as Adobe claiming the right to scan project files and potentially use them to train Firefly, its generative AI model. The backlash was immediate and significant. Prominent designers publicly canceled subscriptions on the spot. Professional studios with confidential client work began formal security assessments of whether Adobe's tools could remain part of their workflows under those terms at all. Adobe issued clarifications stating it does not train Firefly on customer project files, but the clarification arrived after the damage was already done. A separate investigation then found that Firefly's training dataset had included AI-generated images sourced from competitor platforms that had been uploaded to Adobe stock, meaning the supposedly ethically sourced training data Adobe had used as a selling point for Firefly wasn't as clean as advertised. Adobe tightened its stock submission guidelines in response, but the pattern was already set. Every time Adobe touched the AI question, it produced another reason for creative professionals to look elsewhere. And elsewhere, the DaVinci download button was sitting on Blackmagic's website, free, functional, and asking for nothing but an email address. There's a test that every serious claim about professional software eventually has to pass. Not the benchmark test, not the feature comparison spreadsheet, but what you might call the Hollywood test. Whether the people whose careers depend entirely on their tools being the absolute best available, the colorists grading films that will be projected 40 feet tall in front of paying audiences, are using your product when nobody is telling them they have to. DaVinci Resolve passes that test so completely that the list of major productions color graded in it has become almost comically long. Oppenheimer, Avatar, Star Wars, The Martian, Jason Bourne, Alien, Romulus, Pirates of the Caribbean, Superman. These aren't films made by studios experimenting with budget alternatives. These are among the most technically scrutinized visual productions in the histories of cinema, made by teams where the cost of a wrong tool choice is measured in reshoots, missed release windows, and careers. The colorists working on these films chose DaVinci Resolve not because it was free and not because it was cheap, but because in the specific domain of color science, the mathematics of how the software translates captured light data into the image an audience sees, nothing else comes close. Now, it's worth being fair here because Adobe hasn't simply sat still while all of this happened. Premiere, which Adobe quietly rebranded from Premiere Pro to simply Premiere earlier this year as part of a broader Creative Cloud restructuring, launched a dedicated color mode this past April, a full-screen grading workspace built specifically to answer the exact criticism that's been driving editors toward Resolve. It's a real functional response, not a token gesture, and Adobe still commands genuine loyalty in specific corners of the industry. According to data circulating around this year's Sundance Film Festival, roughly 85% of the independent filmmakers who premiered work there were using Adobe's Creative Cloud somewhere in their pipeline. Adobe's ecosystem integration, the tight handoff between Premiere, After Effects, Photoshop, and Audition through Dynamic Link remains genuinely difficult to fully replicate. And for editors already living inside that ecosystem, the switching calculation looks different than it does for someone starting fresh in 2026. But here's the part of DaVinci's story that even people who know about its color grading dominance sometimes underestimate. The software that began as a color grading tool has, through a series of deliberate strategic acquisitions across roughly a decade, become something with no precise equivalent anywhere else in the creative software market. In 2014, Blackmagic acquired Fusion, a professional visual effects and motion graphics compositing application with a node-based workflow used in Hollywood productions for decades, and integrated its capabilities directly into DaVinci Resolve. No round-trip export process required. In 2017, Blackmagic acquired Fairlight, a professional digital audio workstation used for mixing and sound design on major film and television productions, and integrated it into Resolve with the same philosophy. The result, by the time all of these integrations had matured, is an application that handles professional video editing, industry-leading color grading, Hollywood-grade VFX compositing, and professional audio post-production, all within one unified project structure, where changes in one area of the workflow are immediately visible across all others without file export, format conversion, or application switching. To replicate that workflow inside Adobe's ecosystem, you'd need Premiere for editing, After Effects for VFX and motion graphics, Audition for audio, and the new color mode, or a Lumetri panel for grading. 4 separate applications, 4 separate subscription line items baked into a Creative Cloud plan, and a round-trip workflow that introduces file management complexity and the possibility of quality loss at every handoff. DaVinci Resolve replaces all 4 of those applications with one $299 purchase, or for the vast majority of individual users and small studios, with the free version that still contains roughly 95% of the same capability. The free version question is the one that stops most people cold when they encounter it for the first time, because it genuinely doesn't feel real. When Blackmagic says the free version has 95% of the paid product, it means that in a way more literal than most software companies' marketing language usually allows. The studio version, sold as that one-time payment, currently sitting around $295 to $299, depending on region, adds things like extended noise reduction and AI upscaling tools, support for resolutions well beyond typical delivery, needs and collaboration features designed for large studio environments where multiple colorists and editors work on the same project simultaneously across a networked facility. For the overwhelming majority of freelancers, YouTubers, and small production teams, none of that gap is the difference between amateur and professional work. It's the difference between what a solo editor needs and what a facility with 40 employees needs, and Blackmagic drew that line deliberately, not accidentally. The hashtag that crystallized the cultural moment around Adobe's user relationship wasn't invented by a competitor. It wasn't seeded by a PR campaign. It emerged organically across Reddit, YouTube, and professional forums where practitioners share tools and workflows. Simply ditch Adobe. It kept resurfacing reliably every time Adobe announced a price increase, every time a hidden fee made the news, every time the terms of service controversy resurfaced, every time Premiere crashed mid-project and took unsaved work down with it. The irony that Adobe's own behavior became the most effective promotional force driving users toward DaVinci Resolve is real, and it is not subtle. In the final section, we're going to look at where Blackmagic's revenue actually stands today, the 2 genuine risks hanging over this entire story, and what the honest, practical path forward looks like if you're one of the millions of people sitting on the fence right now. So where does the money actually land in all of this? And what does the honest, complete picture look like once you step back from the individual battles and look at the trajectory? By 2025, industry estimates placed Blackmagic Design's total revenue at somewhere around $550 million annually, a figure driven substantially by hardware purchases from users who entered the ecosystem through the exact free software door Blackmagic had left wide open for anyone willing to walk through it. That's the mechanism working exactly as Grant Petty designed it. You download Resolve for free, you fall in love with the color science, and 18 months later, you're buying a Blackmagic camera or a color grading control panel, because by then the software has already taught you what real color control feels like, and going back to anything less feels like a downgrade. Meanwhile, Blackmagic has been watching the AI moment unfold with the same disciplined patience that's characterized every major decision Petty has made since acquiring DaVinci back in 2008. DaVinci Resolve's AI features, the neural engine tools for scene detection, facial recognition for color matching, Magic Mask for subject isolation, speed warp retiming, and the substantial AI expansion that shipped with version 21 this past May were introduced without the controversies that have followed Adobe's AI rollout. Because Blackmagic's AI tools are largely local, they run on your hardware, they process your footage on your machine, they don't require sending your project files to a cloud server operated by a company that just settled a federal lawsuit over the transparency of its user agreements. That alignment between Blackmagic's implementation and Grant Petty's stated belief that personal computing should distribute power to individual users rather than centralizing data with corporations isn't accidental. It's the same principle that produced the free version and the $299 perpetual license applied consistently to the AI question. For professional users who spend their working lives handling other people's confidential creative work, that alignment with local processing and genuine data privacy isn't a minor feature preference. It's increasingly a procurement requirement. Now, before this starts to sound like an uncomplicated victory story, it's worth being honest about where the real risks sit, because a fair breakdown doesn't just cheerlead one side. There are two scenarios that should genuinely concern anyone who's come to value what Blackmagic has built. The first is that Blackmagic has also introduced a subscription option of its own in recent years, described as a rental model priced well below Adobe's, alongside the perpetual license, which has made some longtime users nervous about whether the direction of travel is quietly shifting toward the exact model DaVinci built its reputation opposing. Blackmagic has maintained the one-time $299 purchase alongside that monthly option, framing it as expanded choice for freelancers who need access for a single project rather than a replacement for the permanent license. And Grant Petty's long history of running the company without investor pressure suggests the perpetual license isn't going anywhere quietly, but it's a detail worth watching, not dismissing. The second concern is more structural. With Blackmagic's revenue approaching $550 million and its user base in the millions, the company becomes an increasingly attractive acquisition target in the history of creative software companies being acquired, and immediately pivoting towards subscription maximization strategies is long and consistently grim. What Blackmagic has built works precisely because Grant Petty answers to nobody but his own philosophy. The day that changes is the day this entire story changes with it. For now, the philosophy holds. The free version is still there. The $299 perpetual license is still there. And Adobe's stock chart, the DOJ settlement, and the ongoing Outrest Ditch Adobe conversation are all still, making the case for DaVinci Resolve more effectively than any advertisement Blackmagic could ever buy. So here's the practical part. If you're one of the people sitting on the fence right now wondering whether any of this actually applies to you, if you're a student, a freelancer, a YouTuber, or a small studio just getting started, downloading the free version of DaVinci Resolve 21 costs you nothing but the time it takes to install it. And there's no financial risk in spending a weekend testing it against whatever you're currently using. If you're already deep inside Adobe's ecosystem, genuinely relying on dynamic link between Premiere, After Effects, and Photoshop for a workflow that's taken years to build, the switching calculation looks different, and Premiere's new color mode this year is a real acknowledgement from Adobe that it knows exactly where the pressure is coming from. Neither path is universally correct. What's changed concretely, the same way it's changed across so much of the software world in 2026, is that testing the alternative no longer requires the financial commitment or professional risk it demanded even 5 years ago. Let's zoom out, because that's really what this whole breakdown has been building toward. What happened between Adobe and DaVinci Resolve over the past several years isn't really a story about two pieces of video editing software. It's a small, concrete example of something larger playing out across the entire creative technology landscape. The growing willingness of professionals to walk away from a dominant, entrenched platform the moment a genuinely capable, values-driven alternative removes the financial risk of trying. For decades, switching away from Adobe carried enough friction, enough perceived risk, and enough sheer unfamiliarity that most people simply never seriously attempted it, regardless of how frustrated they'd become with rising prices, hidden cancellation fees, or AI terms nobody fully trusted. Blackmagic didn't create that frustration. Adobe did, one price increase and one terms of service update at a time. What Blackmagic did was remove the single biggest practical barrier standing between that frustration and actually doing something about it, and it did it quietly, funded by camera sales instead of a marketing budget, for the better part of 2 decades. None of this means Adobe is disappearing. It still commands roughly 35% of the professional video editing market, as of 2026, still dominates Sundance pipelines, and still has genuine defensible strengths and ecosystem integration that DaVinci hasn't fully matched. This is not a collapse story. But underneath that headline, dominance sits a specific, substantial, and thoroughly documented population of colorists, editors, students, and independent studios who found a genuinely low-risk way to test the alternative for the first time in their professional lives, instead of just grumbling about subscription pricing in a forum thread and doing nothing else about it. So here's my actual question for you, and I want an honest answer in the comments. Have you already made the switch to DaVinci Resolve? And if so, what finally pushed you over the edge? The pricing, the color tools, or one specific Adobe decision that broke the trust for good? Are you still on Premiere because your workflow is too deep to unwind? Oh, and that's a completely reasonable position to hold. Or has this breakdown been the first time you've seriously considered that the free download sitting on Blackmagic's website might actually be the better tool, not just the cheaper one? Tell me, honestly, because the real shape of this shift, the one actually happening on individual hard drives and individual timelines right now, is being written by exactly the choices you and people like you are quietly making this year.